Well, it's a real pleasure and an honor to introduce our dinner speaker, Holly Ruxin. I met Holly last year through a mutual friend, Amber Nystrom. She's a colleague as well, who's been working with me and Rebecca on our forays into the impact investing and alternative finance worlds, crazy worlds. Holly is passionate about using her vast experience with financial markets to help the planet and its citizens. When we invited her to give a keynote about her work at our first Impact Investing Conference last June in Toronto, she jumped on a plane and spent 2 days with us. We were struck by her generosity, her deep knowledge of capital markets, and her commitment to help create financial products that sustain people and resonate with their values. Not many people on Wall Street or Bay Street do that. Holly started her career at Goldman Sachs in New York in the late 1990s. She moved to San Francisco while at the Bank of America, and then she worked at Morgan Stanley until 2012. The unraveling of the global financial system and her own personal insights about family changed her focus from simply making money to sustaining people. She created her own wealth management and capital markets trading firm, Montcalm TCR, and her goal is to help create a new socioeconomic model that supports values, needs, and goals of investors, large and small. So please join me in welcoming Holly Ruxin.
Thank you, Jeffrey and Rebecca, for an amazing conference. He has a knack for bringing amazing people together. So we've heard a lot of really interesting information today, and we took notes, and we learned a lot, and right now I want you to pick up your glass of wine and start drinking it. Because we're going to, thank you, really, I'm serious. Because we're going to go a little esoteric tonight, and we're just going to have a little bit of fun, and I want to have you leave this thinking about things a little differently. So I would also say take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. I like to push people, and I like to open people's minds. So Jeffrey gave a little bit about my background. I grew up a nice Jewish girl from New York and told you go to Wall Street and you get the red Porsche, number 16 candles. Cute guy. And you go and you make money. And really, I mean, I have 3 children, and my children are actually taught in school to be mindful and to recycle and to think about things that matter, even in a school basically where everyone there works for a hedge fund, but that's besides the point. That's not what we were taught in the 80s. That's not the environment that we all grew up in, and it's not the purview that we had on the world. So I did that, and I went out, and I was good at math, and my father worked at Citibank and told me, when you went to London, you're going to work in capital markets derivatives. And I had no idea what in the world that was. I did that. I learned a lot. I really loved it. I thought it was super interesting. I went to business school, and I remember I interviewed at Goldman Sachs, and they asked me what the yield curve was, and I had no idea. 12 months later, I had a full-time job in the fixed income derivatives desk. Because to an extent, back then, values did matter. And customer service and integrity actually did matter. And I think that I got that job as a young person because I think I had my feet on the ground. So what I learned at a young age is a couple of things. The first thing I learned is that capital markets is actually a really beautiful thing, that there are products that have really helped the world. And I would love for everyone here to think about what they do and what industry they're in and what they're concentrating on and what are the elements, even the old elements, of the foundation of what they do that actually do have a flow of values that makes sense. For example, the futures market. I went to Chicago after college. There's a farmer. They need to get $60 a bushel in June 1st to pay for their food and pay for their rent and pay for their children. So someone came up with a contract and said, here, I'm going to hand this to you, and I'm going to give you $60 on June 1st. If the sun's shining and a cloud comes across at 3 o'clock or whatever it may be, they made that contract somewhat complicated. But you know what? That farmer now knew that they were able to feed their children and pay for their rent. That actually is I think that's brilliant. So there are lots of examples in capital markets that actually worked. What happened then is people started trading and speculating on those contracts. On the derivatives desk in the late 90s at Goldman Sachs, we were creating derivatives for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the housing authorities that are no longer here because they blew up, because we all know the reasons of why that happened and the value system in place. But they had billions of dollars of mortgages on their books, and we needed to keep them sustainable. So we sold them derivatives that helped them stay sustainable. So capital markets is not necessarily a bad thing, and that's really what I learned. Over time, I started looking around me at how I was compensated, how I was lauded. I was told probably 2 years into my career at Goldman Sachs, it was still private, that if you're not paranoid, you're not doing your job. It sounds funny, but it was actually, they were dead serious. They were dead serious. I watched, you sit in a big trading floor and you watched people get fired. You go watch partners get fired. You watch people stab each other in the back over and over and over again. And your whole job was to figure out how to make the most money so that didn't happen to you. And the truth, it was going to happen to you because it happened to pretty much 90% of the people who work there eventually, or I'm exaggerating. So that's my background of understanding that system, the good and the bad. In 2008, when the markets crashed, I really understood how that happened just because I'd been there. And we all knew that was going to happen when basically the mortgages, the adjustable rate mortgages basically came to fruition. And no one knew the extent of the problem, but we all knew it was coming to some extent. We'd all given up that it was going to come, but it came. At the same time, I just had my third child. I was running a business at Morgan Stanley on the ultra high net worth floor, people managing billions of dollars, the big leagues. And my eldest son just started falling. So all of a sudden he lost his words in 2 weeks. Then he lost his ability to hold a drink. And very long story short, he was 5 at the time, almost 5 at the time. He's now 13 and a half. And he is severely, severely disabled. Can't even sit up. It's a beautiful, amazing thing. And I tell this story because he awoke in me something that had been in there. And at the time, I was not at a conference at a room full of people like you. I didn't think there were people like you. I knew that they knew that I was waking up, and I knew that I was onto something, and that he was showing me a value system that mattered. And I looked around at Morgan Stanley, which at that point, they had bought Salomon Smith Barney. I mean, they were just an institution that's just trying to bring in revenues and assets. Like, they weren't even pretending that there were any value system in place. Because as there's a saying goes that when there's not a lot of bananas in the jungle, the monkeys go crazy. That was starting to happen in Wall Street. Margins were shrinking and they weren't making money, and they were really just the pursuit of greed or pleasing the shareholders. I'm not judgmental on all this. It's just understanding the system. So that really changed how I started looking at things. And I started understanding that there was a model that was based on scarcity and competition. And how do we start creating a model that we can use the existing pipes that exist in Wall Street and start putting a different value system on it? So I went and I founded my own firm. That firm is based on 4 tenets that I will say to you because it moves into kind of the next things I want to talk about. The first is integrity. And it's great to go out and say, have integrity. And I think, again, for all of you in all the different industries and all the different places you work, I have integrity. Okay, that's fine. But how do you show that? In our company, we show that by transparency in our reporting system, very simply. Wall Street tends to have a reporting system, doesn't actually tell their clients what's going on. So different ways that you show you have integrity, actually the fundamentals of that, and it's very key. The next is collaboration. Collaborating, that word came up so many times today. It is absolutely the key to a better future. Collaborating is coordinating with all different people, coordinating with a client's accountant, with a client's estate planner, coordinating with the person in the department next to you, coordinating with the person making policy somewhere else. Collaboration is really, really key. It is not something that I was taught on Wall Street. They did not collaborate at all, unless they had to make a deal happen. Reason that collaboration is so important, and so many of you talked about it today, is that it turns into something where I think a lot of the magic happens, and that's engagement. Because when you have collaboration, then engagement, I like to say, is when everyone's into the table and their elbows in the table. They're actually leaning in. They are actually, not to quote Joe Sandberg, we'll put that out. They're actually engaging and they actually care. So when you have engagement, you can feel all of us sitting here at this dinner. the palpability of how amazing this room is and how much has come together and how much we've all learned is because of the engagement. We haven't actually collaborated as much today. We've collaborated by all coming to the same place at the same time, but to really think about it, when are you collaborating and when are you then turning that into engagement? Because that's when the magic happens. That's when the magic happens with my clients, and that's when the magic happens where we actually really start creating change. The last is sustainability, and Jeffrey talked about this in his very nice introduction, is when you have all those factors, now the key for me at my company and my clients is their own sustainability. And that is a different equation, but kind of the same thing. If someone has $50,000 invested with us because I got rid of minimums because I do not feel that only wealthy people have a right to smart investing, or someone has $100 million, it is kind of the same equation. But for people to walk out and feel that they have their own sustainability and the own understanding and power of their financial situation, I watch people's shoulders go down. Now, be that the $100 million patriarch who's still scared to death that he's going into the depression. I have seen more $100 million clients, men and women, scared to death. To the same of someone who's walked out and just realized that they can pay for their dog surgery because they figured out how to get them cash flow. That model really started making me think and kind of got me into the next passion of how do we create sustainability and personal sovereignty, agency. There's a zillion words we can use for regular human beings. Okay, it's a big jump. But it's really what I think ultimately we're all up here for. And I've kind of asked lots of people different questions of, what does innovation mean? What does all of this mean? Why do governments care? I think most people in this room care about what happens. So now I want to talk a little bit about what the system is. I got a couple answers of what innovation was or what someone's company was, and some of the lines that are going on between that. Innovation being exploiting a marketplace and getting as much money as you could versus social innovation. I'm sure I'm totally misquoting you. And looking at a system that works. I want to give a few examples because I really want to unpack this a little bit with you guys tonight and get a little bit more into the emotions of why this is so hard. So I was sitting at the table tonight and had a lovely conversation with someone in venture capital about how we create products that actually are in all of your retirement accounts, because as far as I see, we do not have viable investment vehicles. Making sure you all can retire and can feed yourselves is not something that's going to necessarily be sustained by a global equity market that's basically of the risk of the system. And we had a very engaging conversation. Well, I have another example of a conversation I had a week ago at my own home with a dear friend who works for a large financial institution. And at dinner, we probably had too much wine, and we've been together for a couple days. His wife said something about not understanding what he did, and I think I said, that's because what you do is not real. Not the nicest thing to say, but it really started this conversation about, and I'm not going to name the institution, but you can only imagine a big fund institution, huge on the planet. I started saying to him, well, your pursuit of returns, that's fine, but is anything you're doing helping the world? And he got lividly angry, and started going off, but about you impact people, and and I tried to bring it back down and tried to say, okay, well, just give me some examples of how that's helping. And these kind of conversations happen a lot. He couldn't give me an example, and we walked out, and he apologized the next morning, and he said, I'm sorry. I said, I'm sorry. He was fine. He said, I'm sorry I personally attacked you. And I said, no, I love these conversations. But to me, people are out there trying to make the right decisions. People are trying to make the right decisions, and I want to really understand what about showing someone that a system is broken or asking the hard questions makes people so upset. I'll give you another example, and then we can maybe dig into some of these reasons. I'm on the board of the disabled organization where my son goes after school. It's also a place where adults can go. So really amazing, and they have a very large budget started by this woman. I guess I'm not going to say the organization. Really amazing values, do amazing work. And I was put head of the investment committee, and things had kind of changed. And suddenly I had a new executive director and the head of the board, and we all were talking. And suddenly they wanted to put everything in equities, and I'd kind of changed the asset allocation to be more risk averse. I asked them also, is this fitting the values of what we're doing? And again, a very livid conversation happened. There was so much fear I actually had someone there say, well, we just need to find where we can buy low, sell high, where there's scarcity, and we can. I look at him and I'm like, you just took a job helping 2,500 severely disabled people, like, go get jobs. Is what you're saying match the value system of our investments? And oh my God, the look on their faces, it took them. We did eventually go the way that I wanted to go, but it was really scary. I think they were very scared at this bifurcation between how they existed in the world and how they thought of a system. So what made me start thinking is, how do we understand these systems and how do we truly change them? And what do you do when you don't get to sit at a dinner that you guys have put together and have a tangible conversation? And what do you do when people do get scared? And why do they get scared? It's been a natural evolution of change. And I think what for me and what I really want to talk to you guys about is that ultimately we're bridges. We're building bridges. And what does building bridges mean? Building bridges means, it's taken me a long time to understand this. You've got one side here and you've got one side over there, and they're actually not connected. Because I spend so much time over here, so frustrated why no one's understanding me over there for years and years and years, because it's been about 8-9 years since I kind of had my own awakening and I really started pushing in the financial markets to try to create products that are going to solve this problem. And every single person in this room has got something they're trying to do or something they want to change or some system they know they could probably tweak. So to be a bridge, what are some of the elements that we can leave here today and think about tomorrow that might be helpful in changing these broken systems where there is a lot of pushback because people are scared? If the system doesn't work, then what system is going to work? And what does that mean for my friend who's a lovely person, who's a lovely father, who's a lovely caretaker of his family? If he actually sunk in the fact that maybe what he's doing isn't actually helping people and isn't actually what he's teaching his sons, that is scary as all heck. So we have to do this brick by brick, I think. And it's hard. It's hard to really keep imagining it that way. And the way that we do brick by brick, and this is the same thing for the young entrepreneurs I talked to tonight, and I do think that the younger generations get this more. And it was somewhat discouraging talking to them because I was hearing that the universities aren't necessarily supporting that. And it's because they're run by people in different generations. Okay, so we're all going to grow up and die. So they're going to take over and we will be fine. But we still have to continue to make sure we understand that we are bridges. Every brick that we put down has got to have the fundamental elements that make sense, that are solving the problem, Now, this is why I want everyone to take another sip of wine, because I'm not talking, you start getting too low into the minutia of this conversation and you're going to get lost. No, I don't need it. Thank you. You start drawing lines of what's social, what's not social, and a lot of lines are being drawn. But when you really look at every decision you're making, you're saying, is this solving a problem? Is this solving a problem I want to solve? Is this making humanity better? Is this creating a system? We have a system really that was built on commerce, not community. Pretty basic. And yesterday was yesterday. We're not, I really, especially in my industry, past performance is not indicative of future results, but really, economics and everything about our society tomorrow has really nothing to do with where it was. We have completely changed the game with technology, and we're going to be a completely different game in 20 years from now. That's why this bridge is imperative. First of all, if we don't build the bridge, in essence, we may all fall in the water. And if we don't build the bridge, the next generation's going to. But you know what? We might as well, because we're sitting here, and what else are we doing? And we also, another aspect that's really key and came in for me in the last 10 years is it suddenly started feeling really good. It feels really good to be here today. It feels really good to talk to people about things that matter and to talk intelligently with tons of expertise. It didn't feel good to be paranoid at Goldman Sachs and know you're going to be fired at the next turn. It didn't feel good in our hearts. I spent the weekend, there was something in Tahoe called Achieve Tahoe where they put all the disabled people on the slopes. And I was surrounded by people who come and volunteer their time to come help disabled people come on the slopes. And some of these people had made a ton of money. They all felt really good. They all had really good days. It was really an amazing energy out there. That's kind of on the side point. So coming back to, fine, we also need to go and we are accountable for things, and we're accountable for revenues, and we're accountable for certain productivities, and we have things that we have to do. We also have our own sustainability that matters, which is why this gets so complicated. Because you can listen to me tonight and then you can go home and, I don't know, maybe you need to go take a vacation and you have to figure out how to have the money for it, or maybe your parent is sick and you don't know how to fund that, and we've got real problems. I mean, I know that so well. So we have to constantly balance between what we're doing and how we are building our brick with the best integrity you possibly can in the right way. So I come back to keys on how do you make decisions. Is it collaborative? Are you really talking to people in other departments? Are you really getting advice from someone you maybe didn't ask advice from? Are you really looking outside the box to a solution that you know is the solution, that it's that point over there because you've got your eye on the ball, not of all the other factors? Can you stop for a second and ask yourself, why am I making this decision? If you're making that decision because you have to make money because you're going to lose your job if you don't, fine. But know that that's why you're making a decision, and maybe next time you can get yourself in a different situation. You don't have to make it. But being very conscious of just the value system of what you're doing is such a great start, because it's just a bridge. And we're all going to do as many bricks as we can until we go off and retire or whatever, and the next people come in. The bridge has got to be built. From that collaboration, are we networking? Are you really bringing in a networked solution into what's going on? And in that network solution, are the values and the mission all aligned? I mean, this is a really tall order. It sounds like it's easy, and we all know none of it's easy. And we all got pressures tomorrow to go do what we have to do. But understanding that every brick we put down, how many people understand blockchain? Where at all? So, yeah. I mean, I was very anti-Bitcoin for all the reasons that it was going outside the current currency markets. But someone recently explained to me blockchain, and I may be completely doing this wrong. So it's basically one block on top of each other that cannot be undone. So therefore, it's trustworthy. You can't undo it. You can only add to it. So you can go back and see it. And suddenly that clicked in for me. And suddenly I started seeing how that actually makes sense in how we do business also. What I'm not articulating is what a system that is fixed. Because I think we all know what the system is fixed. It's not making a decision between social entrepreneurs and regular entrepreneurs, making money and being good for humanity. It is a combination thereof that brings this planet forward. It's what I kind of started my talk about capital markets, understanding that's what capital markets were designed for, was to actually move the planet forward. We take capital, we invest it. So I'm assuming we're all on the same page, and that's what ultimately our goals are. So having every decision that we make be as articulate as we can to trying to do the right thing in a collaborative way. So what I wanted to start this with is innovation comes from the heart. Because innovation is not just technology, it's all those things. But the real true innovation, everything that was said today, is really coming from our hearts. And having the guts to really keep doing that. Having the guts to stand up when something doesn't resonate. When you know it's not in that plan that's going to help people. And understanding that people are scared of systems that don't work. Our whole planet is scared right now, politically, business-wise. I mean, it's so obvious. It is a real turning point. And we are lucky enough to have come into a room together to put our heads together. This is serious stuff. This is not kind of something we sit and we chat about today and don't go home tomorrow and really try to make a change in not tearing down the system, but disintermediating it into a system that very simply is one that is honoring community and humans and not commerce, or doing both. You know, I think government is such an amazing example of that, because revenue and money is incredibly important. We can't throw it out the window. And you come, you know, the world we come from, we grew up in, is anyone who cared about anything was altruistic, and they were a monk and they lived up in some mountain and they had no money. That's not what we're talking about. I truly believe, I mean, any investments I make at my firm, it's a non-issue. They have to be impact-oriented, positive-oriented, human-oriented. And that's not just because I'm altruistic and think that's a great idea. It's because I'm actually a value investor, and that's actually the only companies that are going to be successful. I mean, it is such a no-brainer at this point. But with that said, people are very, very scared of a system that doesn't work. We live and breathe our socioeconomic model in everything we do, in every time we walk outside, and when we put on our clothes, when we drive in our cars. We are interchanging between money and our socioeconomic and our society. Those two have to start matching. Very simply, they have to start matching. You have to consider what is the human effect of what we're doing, or we're not going to have humans anymore. I mean, it's kind of, it's basically our reality. Probably not in our generation, but we all know what we're facing. And we have technology to help us. I mean, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun and it's kind of easy. I get yelled at all the time, easy. One of the things that we're doing is we're starting to take some amazing projects like putting solar panels into villagers, and we're going to do a bond investment off that. So this thinking outside the box. All we're going to use is the same pipes that Wall Street used to create bad products, and we're just going to create good products. Everything everyone does here, you could probably tweak it a little bit. So I'm going to leave you with the charter, or the encouragement to take risks and have the guts to build that bridge. Please have the guts. And you may get spit on, you may get fired. If you can't afford to get fired, you don't want to get fired. But you may come up against so much resistance in that, because people are scared. They are scared of not relying on a system, because at the end of the day, everyone's got their own head in their head. I don't care if you're president of the United States. We're not going to go there. I don't care if you are Prime Minister of Canada. I don't care if you're the Queen of England. You still have your own head in your own head. We are animals. We are out for our own survival. It is our instincts. So when you are shown something you can't necessarily understand how it's going to work, you're going to fight back. And that's what's happening. We don't have a planet of bad people. We have a socioeconomic model that is no longer serving us. It's gotten to the place, it is what it is. Don't look backwards, we look forward. And we don't have to solve every problem and jump there, just one brick. Just one brick at a time, in a collaborative, networked way. The millennials and the younger people are going to come up and make sure we have infrastructure for them to be able to put more bricks. And we are going to get there where we have a full bridge and we have a new, different kind of society, because we know we have to. We just don't know the timing what it is. So it's a very tall order and it's a very small order at the same time. But it comes from the heart and it comes from having guts. So I'm going to leave it at that. If anyone would like to kind of ask questions or share some of their stories of anyone, a broken system, or getting feedback from that, that could be kind of fun. Go ahead. You want to?
Thank you, Holly. That was excellent. One of the things you mentioned was sustainability, very important. And a while back, I read a really good book called The Search for God and Guinness. Now, first of all, disclosure, I'm a Guinness drinker. But there are two threads in the book. One is the business itself, which is now about 360 years old. There's also a story about the Guinness family who has run the business until fairly recently. And they were very aware and very sensitive to the need to look after the employees and the larger public. They, 100 years ago, they had a health plan for the employees. That was almost unheard of. 100 years ago, they had social workers that went to the homes of their employees to make sure everything was okay. Guinness made a practice of paying their employees between 10 and 15% above average. And they reached out to the larger public. They paid for the restoration of St. Patrick's Cathedral. And even in the height of the Troubles in Ireland in the 70s, there's one thing that Catholics and Protestants could always agree on: Guinness. And I look around at the present business environment. There's a lot of focus on short-term profit, squeezing employees, screwing customers, whereas what Guinness has done is the opposite of what a lot of companies do. And the result is their brand and their business is now about 360 years old and counting, very sustainable. I look around me and wonder how many of the companies today will be around in 360 years. Not many. So I think one of the things that I wanted to say, and appreciate your comments on there, Holly, is as part of sustainability, looking after your customers and your employees is so very important.
That's great. Yeah. That's an idealistic model. That's the model. You just said it. Questions. A lot of us don't work at companies like that or creating companies like that. So sometimes you walk away and say, well, I can't get there. Forget it. The guy who runs my company doesn't give a hoot about any of that stuff, or who's ever running my boss doesn't care. But actually acting out of that way from that model is how we're going to continue to get there. Anyone else? Question? Yeah.
Great company, Guinness, and I've done work for them. And not only did they take care of their employees, they also allowed employees to come in after the lunch hour to come to the cafeteria for free and get food, lunches, and things like that. It was an incredible company. But the family had to sell out to a big multinational corporation. How damn sad. Well, I think the gentleman here they got into a bit of trouble. It was up and down in management and what have you. I mean, I think the first bottle of Guinness was brewed in St. James's Gate before the American Revolution, wasn't it? Yeah. And so it's a real proud history. But they still had to sell out to a big money-grabbing company called Diageo.
Well, and I think what we want to keep looking at is, why is that company money grubbing? What policies are in place that we can change that? How can we move the dial to? I mean, the C corporation in and of itself is legally your fiduciary, beholden to your shareholders. I mean, there's without judging, there are lots of things in place that we can start shifting such that big companies are hopefully not like that.
How many people? Oh, you go ahead, Ron.
Of course.
Yes. Go.
There's been a venture, an equity company out of Brazil that seems to be buying up a lot of stuff, putting a lot of young people in Canada and in the United States. I mean, they've got Kraft, they've got Heinz, I think they bought and they're almost
Buffett.
they're a nasty organization. And there's a lot of young people that do all this jobs, accounting and marketing and sales and stuff. The first thing they do is get rid of R&D, get rid of marketing, get rid of all the knowledge shares. What do you do about a company like that? They're like a flesh-eating disease.
I mean, you could be an activist and not invest in them.
Yeah.
I think,
3G
again,
capital.
I think these examples are big examples, and I think that's where people eyes glaze over and they walk away. Because you can't, how do you solve a problem that big? My answer is tomorrow morning, make decisions that are in vein of a humane, better model, and eventually I believe those guys will fall down. Did you have a question back there?
Wow.
Jeff?
Thank you for the inspiring talk. I just wanted to ask, are you acquainted with the company called Ecosia? The Ecosia search engine is founded on the basis that every time I use it, they're gonna use that money for my hit on their search result to plant a tree in Amazon or in Brazil, okay? So in surface, they say that they use, they're not really non-profit, but they have like 20% profit, they keep it for themselves, and 80% they use for kind of increasing their own capital for this investment, like buying more lands and planting more trees. So they have actually grown pretty fast. So first Google take them as one of the small side project, but then they come up with some ethical clash, like if people would be so altruistic to use this search engine to plant a tree every click, you know, they might click on the wrong stuff without being conscious about it, you know, they might end up in some kind of phishing site or something. So these guys, they stand on their own right now, and they are kind of improving it, the search results and so on. And there are actually people like me who, despite being a bit less limited, like that we are now a bit limited in terms of search result, we're still using the search engine. Thinking about that, if I just use my brain a bit more consciously, a bit more of attention span than 2 seconds before I click, I might be clicking the right stuff, but they're advertising, and the money would be going for planting a tree. So do you think this kind of business model is the future? Is this sustainable? Does it gonna last? Like, how does it work?
I mean, what's coming to me as you're saying that is there's tons of great business models, and there's going to be great companies made, and some are going to be successful, and some are not going to be successful. But what I think is really important from talking to everyone in this room is to understand that creating businesses that help humanity is the only way. That's it. It's the only way of our future. It's not kind of a good idea. It is actually the only way we're going to survive, and it is the only kind of companies we're going to have going forward. Now, I may be delusional, but feel very strongly about this. And I think for those that are not going out and being entrepreneurial and having great ideas like that, I'd have to understand the business model more, is again to wake up tomorrow morning and know that this is the only way, and to do your best to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, so that we can get there.
Thanks, Holly, for such an absolutely incredible talk. I just want to say that I entered university in 2007. I entered University of Waterloo in their mathematics faculty, studying actuarial science, one of the best programs in the world. And I just want to say the amount of disillusionment that I felt over the next couple of years, sitting in those economics and financial mathematics courses, learning how to do swaps, how to do interest rate swaps, how to do derivatives, and then having my economics professors saying that the sky is falling and the world is ending was really hard for me. And through that, seeing, well, why are we saying that this is, you know, financial engineering is our future when we just, like, you know, ended the world with it? So, you know, through that, I absolutely believe that you need to be lecturing at universities, because I haven't heard any of this being talked about my economics, my business ethics course. And I think that that's also what we need to do to turn the tide, because you have kids coming in with neoclassical economic models in their head that they understand that this is how the system is done. So I thank you so much for this talk, but you need to be at universities.
I mean, it's interesting because financial engineering is absolutely our future. The only difference is that, because I was there and I watched it happen, is the ethics, is the morals that were involved in trading the derivatives. Basically, we would sell Fannie Mae a $1 billion derivative, like a swaption, and literally, and this came out in 2008, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, and Deutsche Bank were meeting in hotel rooms and deciding the price of volatility, which is one element in that derivative. So they all decided they were all going to stick volatility, or stick it at 19, where they were actually buying it at 12. You go to Deutsche Bank, say, what's the price? They said $19.20. Go to Merrill Lynch, I'm the client, Freddie Mac. What's the price? It's $19.05, $19.17. You pick I just got a great deal. I picked Merrill at $19.05. They made billions off this. I watched the 27-year-old kid on the swaps desk become partner at 28 years old. So it's not the financial engineering and it's not the economic theories that are broken. It was very clearly the motivations involved, which is why this is not that difficult to fix. If we can all have the guts to have the right motivations, even if you can't do it by starting a company that you click and you plant a tree, And you can just do it tomorrow by just standing in the face of someone who is coming back at you because it scares them when you talk like that, and understanding that's because they're scared of a broken system. Then this is not difficult to shift. And for me, and that's my passion of creating, using that financial engineering and my understanding of the swaptions market and SEC rules and securitization and how Wall Street did it to create new products. We all have our things we're working on, but it's not the infrastructure that's broken, it's the value system.
Great. So actually, just a comment on that. A lot of universities in Canada are moving to provide courses that provide a broader spectrum of impact investing, and how do you really look at the spectrum of that? So I would say Ryerson, U of T, York, like there actually is a movement. So you should be able to find that. My question for you is, investing is kind of one part of it, of living a life of intentionality to do good. Like when you think of impact investing, I think what differentiates it is that intentionality. But there's so many other aspects to life in terms of how we purchase that affects kind of the systems that are in play. How do you reflect on that, and how do you change your day-to-day so that your day-to-day is actually more wholesome in achieving this kind of greater good?
I mean, very simply, it's the intentionality. I mean, you just said it. Everyone's got a different life. Everyone's got different things they're doing. It's your intentionality of how you're going about and what makes you feel good and how you want to act in the world. I've always been one of those. I am not in the business to convince anyone that they should be investing in impact of it. I hate convincing people because I have learned that it doesn't work. You cannot convince. This is so deep-seated in our hearts of how we are raised, what our background is, what our current situation is having the intentionality. If you don't want to buy a product from a certain company, then don't. But it's having the gut, I'm going to keep saying it over again, it's having the guts to have that positive intentionality. And because it doesn't feel good when it doesn't. I have a friend who always says, how does it feel in your body? How does it feel? I never really understand what she's saying, but I'm starting to really get it. It feels good when you make decisions that resonate with yourself. And ultimately, I believe it actually feels better when you're making decisions that resonate with humanity. Because that's kind of, I think, how we're probably wired. We've got love and we've got hate, but hate's really just fear. Actually, someone once told me that every single thing we do is either out of love or fear. Like that binary, that basic. So if we keep bringing that intentionality of love, I mean, really woohooey, but I think you guys understand what I'm saying, to our daily life and how we work, how we make decisions, how we interact with people, and how we make decisions in government, we make decisions in corporations, we're going to shift this really quickly.
Really fascinating talk. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Just kind of curious about the change of value system from financial model into some other aspects of societal affairs, for example, politics, because this value system is a reflection of and is an influential of the policies that are set by governments that are ruled by a value system, by a political body, which is promoting that kind of value system that you just explained, and you are not supportive of. So my point is that instead of the individual that reached to this point who have experienced that, the other value system, and now proposing something else, what would be your suggestion in terms of the holistic approach to policy making to change that value system, to change the system as a whole? Anyway.
Obviously, right policies will help this. I am not a politician and I'm not a policymaker, which is why I chose to speak about being the bridge. Because I understand a lot of people in here who do work for government and do work to create policy. It's not easy. You can't just walk in and completely shift the way things are doing. But you can try to make a policy that you think is in the right direction. I mean, it's got to be step by step. It is a very big ship to turn. But by each person at least trying to change their intention and asking a question, if you're trying to create a policy and it's really not benefiting humanity and you know it, because we all know it, having the guts to ask the question or having the guts to provide an example that maybe it's not, I'm going to tell you, you're going to get lashback. You just are. I mean, I've been experiencing it more and more lately, and it's really puzzling. It's surprising. But change is hard for people to accept. So yeah, if we could change the policies, we'd be done. But it's incredibly hard, and I give tons of kudos to those that are trying to do it in government. We all have our role. I'm doing it in finance. Other people are doing it in government. Other people are doing it in whatever way you're doing it. Do the best you can to at least have the intentionality and to have the guts to bring up the change, shift the conversation if you can. I know I keep saying the same thing over and over again. I wish I had broader solutions, but I almost think the simplicity of it will actually bring about the broader solution. Jeffrey right here.
Who else?
I guess one of the things I wanted to raise is I've heard a lot of people say today that the next generation is going to solve all of our problems. I heard that again in your talk tonight. And while I have a daughter who's part of that generation, and I think they're going to do amazing, incredible things, I don't think we can foist all of the problems on them and wait for them to catch up with the solutions. I think we have a very solid responsibility to do everything that we can to make the world better for them to take that extra leap. And I would caution people against saying, oh, the next generation's going to solve this.
Totally, which is where the whole bridge comes in. But it's also because I think it just gets really scary, and I think people just give up because they figure, and I see this all the time with my friends and my generation, I can't build the whole bridge, so forget it. I'm just going to go with the old way, and I'm just going to make my money, I'm going to retire. Building as many bricks, we have to build new buildings for the next generation, or they're going to fall in the water. Absolutely. I mean, we've heard it. It's just they have a different mindset. They just do. I mean, at least the ones I talk to, they have a deeper understanding of what it means to support community. Just from, I think, their upbringing and the nature of the fact that they're on group texts at 11. I mean, there's so many reasons why they understand community and information. You know, the other thing that's really key that I didn't talk about is that we also controlled information, and I think this came up a lot today too. Corporations controlled information, government controls information, Wall Street controlled information. Well, we are now in an age where we can't control the information anymore. So that gives it gives velocity to this whole idea, just from the nature that we all communicate.
When I started working with you, Holly, and with Amber, and we were setting up our impact investing conference, I talked to several people, sophisticated, either lawyers who were worked in the equity markets, or investors, Bay Street people, Wall Street people, and I experienced the same thing you described earlier with your friend. They weren't screaming at me and yelling at me, but there was a complete dismissal of the granola and airy-fairy and what the hell are you talking about? It's all about returns. We got a question earlier about the returns. You and I have talked a little bit. You've just used fear, but have you thought more deeply about why that reaction? Because is it greed? You talked to me a little about the returns being too high. Do you want to talk a little about that?
Well, it's not greed, it's fear. I mean, we've talked about this too. I mean, we have a changing planet. We haven't had a war on our soil, I mean, Canada or the US, so to speak. We don't have as much to be fearful for. You live in Europe, and I mean, I could go on and on and on of places you could live where having money really mattered. You could buy a plane ticket out, or you could buy a train ticket out, or having control and power on this planet has mattered. Let's not discount that. This is not because we're all assholes or greedy. It's because this was our survival for the last thousands of years. Okay, well, it's 2017 and we are shifting. We are an evolving human race, and technology is pushing us really hard. So we are exponentially shifting. I had someone tell me once that the shift the human race is going towards the next eon or whatever it is bigger than humans learning how to walk, Homo sapiens going on 2 feet. It's a shift. I mean, we're not going to get into the fact the Mayans predicted that in 2012, which is one of the reasons I love that it was established in 2012 for that kind of secret code, because the Mayans predicted the end of the age of materialism to the age of intuition. We are changing our age, and that has to do with the fact that we all communicate on telephones, on smartphones now. I mean, we communicate completely differently. In terms of returns, one of the biggest reasons that the returns conversation hasn't changed, we are in a zero interest rate environment. And we are not changing it anytime soon, because very simply, you rise interest rates in the US too much, and then our currency gets too strong, and it's going to hurt our economics. So if that's for every country, there's lots of reasons, and it's because again, the velocity of the way we change information and we trade back and forth globally is such we cannot rise interest rates. So an idea that we need to get 10 to 15% returns is ridiculous. The truth is that anyone who can grow at 4 to 7% year over year over year over year without losing capital, it's a home run. I mean, that's amazing. And so Wall Street's not allowed that conversation to shift either, because once that conversation shifts, the whole thing starts falling down. And there's lots of money reasons why no one wants the whole thing falling down, but we also can have the whole thing falling down because people rely on those investments to have their own sustainability, which is why kind of matching, putting money into capital people who need it, and then having investments that create sustainability is so much of a passion for me. And then the policies are key, and the companies are key. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just making sure: are we serving humanity? Are we serving community and people, or are we serving commerce? And we, for historically, have served commerce. It is what it is. But we have to shift.
Well, thanks so much, Holly. As expected.
My
it was
pleasure.
great.
Thank you.
That was wonderful.